Hello everyone and welcome to the Heroes Archives. Today we'll be taking a look at Beruka the Quiet Assassin, a wyvern rider originating from Fire Emblem 14 Fates. First we'll be taking a look at her stats and basic equipment, then go over a few builds, followed by how she compares to other units, and concluding with some closing thoughts. Let's begin. In Heroes, Beruka is an Axe Flyer. She is currently available in both the 3-star and 4-star summoning pools. At 5-star level 40, her base stats are as follows: 46 HP, 29 attack, 23 speed, 37 defense, and 22 resistance. She has a super flaw in her attack stat. In addition, Beruka can receive Dragon Flower bonuses up to 10 times, totaling 2 plus 10 to all of her stats. With a glance, Beruka's core stats are her HP and defense, which makes her a durable wall. Her high defense will increase her effective HP, allowing her to take multiple physical attacks. Packaging this onto a flyer, it's easy to identify Beruka as not just a wall, but instead a flying fortress. This doesn't come without any drawbacks, of course, especially in Beruka's case. While I did say being a flyer is great, being one who is supposed to take hits is tough, as all flying units are prone to anti-flyer weapons such as bows. This is easily remediable by using the IO Shield skill. However, you either lose your A slot or Seal slot. Because I consider the A slot to have more powerful options available, IO Shield will often occupy Beruka's Sacred Seal for most builds. Beruka's next problem is her speed. Now, speed is an important factor in both offense and defense, since it determines if you're going to be doubling the enemy or preventing the enemy from doubling you. Beruka's speed fails in both regards. 23 speed nowadays is terrible. You cannot double, instead you are getting doubled yourself. While skills like Quick Riposte can allow Beruka to double during the enemy phase, her next problem will make retaliating extremely difficult. Which in this case, Beruka's attack is quite abysmal. With 29 base attack, Beruka will barely leave a scratch. Instead, she'll likely rely on her teammates to deal the necessary damage to take down opponents. This isn't saying she can't help herself. Beruka's weapon, which we'll get to later, will help a lot, and if you give Beruka certain skills through inheritance, such as the damage special Ignis, Beruka will be able to contribute in combat. The next issue is her resistance, and it's a special problem. On its own, 22 resistance is poor. Not only will Beruka be obliterated by any magical damage, she'll also be prone to sabotage, ploy, and other res checking skills. So is res not worth any of your resources to invest in? Well, with her excellent HP and her unique weapon refinement, and some other weapons available, she does have an acceptable amount of magical bulk. Although it isn't enough to fully protect herself from certain heavy hitters, Beruka can function as a decent mixed wall. Now for her last problem, which is her arena scoring. Because Beruka is a Gen 1 launch unit, her stat totals are less than newer units, having her at a scoring disadvantage in modes relying on base stat totals such as the arena. With the release of dual skills, this is an easy fix, but there's 3 issues. First, it's hard to obtain since it's currently available on a single seasonal unit. Second, you're sacrificing Beruka's A slot for scoring maximization. And third, base stat totals are again on the rise. Now that we've gone over Beruka's stats and its problems, let's go over her base equipment. Apart from her weapon, it's very lacking. At 5-star rarity, Beruka's initial weapon is Beruka's Axe, a 16 might weapon with an effect of reducing special cooldown count by 1. In addition to the basic stat refinements, Beruka's Axe has a special refinement available. At the start of combat after an HP check, 2 effects happen. The enemy is afflicted with a -4 attack debuff during combat, and if Beruka attacks them, their special cooldown count falls by 1. An overall perfect effect as it frees up guard from Beruka's other skill slots. Now, as I've said, the rest of Beruka's base kit is lacking. So, moving on to her special, we have Glimmer. This special does 50% of damage dealt. So, if you deal 10 damage, and the special activates during combat, it will add an additional 5 damage. The issue is Beruka has too little of an attack stat to effectively use this special. It's heavily suggested to replace this skill. Onto her passives, we have, for her A slot, Defiant Defense. At the start of the turn, if Beruka passes the 50% HP check, she'll be granted a defense field buff depending on skill rank. Simply put, this skill isn't good. For starters, it isn't active initially. You must have already received enough damage to even receive the buff, making it effective for only 50% of a unit's life. Next, it takes up the A slot, and as I've already stated, there are more powerful options available. And lastly, Brazen skills exist. They are generally better since they have an easier activation threshold and they don't compete with other field buffs most likely granted by Beruka's other teammates. Moving on to Beruka's last skill, we have Lunge. After combat, if Beruka initiated the attack, if she is alive, and both Beruka and her target are able to be placed onto the tiles the other is on, they will swap places. This skill is extremely niche. While it definitely has its use such as swapping and encircling the enemy, replacing Lunge is often recommended. Overall, Beruka's base kit is in need of heavy inheritance. Her weapon is great, it has a useful refinement that would complement her bulky stat spread. But her weapon is not what needs replacing, the rest of the kit does. So let's get started by looking at some builds. For our first build, we have a budget bruiser set. Quick Riposte will be used to compensate Beruka's low speed and allow her to do follow-up attacks during the enemy phase. This will be useful since we also have Beruka's Axe and Ignis equipped. If Beruka does double during the enemy phase, she'll be able to retaliate with a fully charged Ignis. To make this work, we need Beruka to survive multiple hits. So we're going to be inheriting skills that will improve her defensive ability. For our A skill, we have a somewhat strange option in Fortress Defense, in that we immediately reduce Beruka's low attack even further for even more defense. Alternatively, Close Defense or Steady Stance can work, but you'll be restricting Beruka's use to the enemy phase. Brazen Attack Defense also works, but you'll need to take some damage before it's activated. Now, while Quick Riposte is a nice offensive B skill, defensive skills like Guard or Renewal can be outfitted instead. Apart from supportive options from Hone, Fortifies, Wards, Drives, etc., we can take Attack Smoke for our C skill to reduce the attack of any nearby enemies surrounding our target. Taking Panic Ploy can also work here. Iot Shield will be our primary seal. If it isn't necessary, Panic Ploy, Close Defense, Brazen Attack Defense, Renewal, or even Fortress Defense all work. Overall, this is a classic build. It won't do much without Ignis charged up, but Beruka will be able to take some attacks for your team. Moving on to our next build, we have a high investment Distant Foil build, specializing in baiting and damaging archers and other physical ranged threats. We again take Beruka's Axe along with its special refinement since it grants us the ability to inflict guard, which is key in delaying specials from meta archers. While I do prefer Ether for its defense reduction and healing, Ignis is better suited to secure KOs if Beruka is able to follow up with Quick Riposte, although Quick Riposte is mainly used to grant another attack to inflict guard status. But this does leave Beruka vulnerable to follow-up cancelling skills like Null Follow-Up. So if you prefer supportive B options, take Mystic Boost for healing or a Chill skill for debuffs. We again take Iot Shield to eliminate Flyer weakness. Finally, we have an open Assist and Seal slot for buffing, positional, or other supportive skills of your choosing. It's advised to take an attack asset with a defense asset if you're focused on surviving. Now, apart from this build being quite expensive, there is still the issue of this build lacking damage. While Beruka can secure KOs on a few archers, most archers will be able to survive, leaving them in range for Wings of Mercy, Vantage, and other low HP reliant skills. While this does mean we can secure the KO with another unit, having Beruka do it on her own would often be better. With this build against non-archers, much of the same occurs. She'll be able to KO some opponents, primarily lance units, with the majority of other units surviving with decent HP. Most sword units and other magical threats are still troubling for Beruka. Moving on to our next build, we have a mixed defensive set. We'll be utilizing Fortress Defense Res, Beruka's Special Refine, Quick Riposte, and IOT Shield to have the tools to survive against many types of different units. Fortress Defense Res boosts Beruka's overall physical and magical bulk. Beruka's Special Refinement provides the necessary guard skill, as well as a small attack debuff. Quick Riposte will be used to grant Beruka an extra attack for proccing guard, and IOT Shield to eliminate flyer weakness. Altogether, we have one durable unit capable of receiving most attacks from swords all the way to some mages. We can swap out Quick Riposte for guard bearing, but I still prefer the additional attack to activate guard status. We do have an open C slot which we can use for flyer mobility skills like guidance. We can also equip panic skills to have some method to proc panic status. Overall, I really like this build since it packs so many defensive tools onto one unit. Of course, there are drawbacks. For starters, we severely lack distant counter like skills. Now that Beruka will be facing any type of opponent, being able to retaliate, whether they're melee or ranged, is sorely missed. Next, there are a few stragglers Beruka won't be able to survive against, namely swords and red mages. While a situation where you need to have Beruka fend off against a Super Zelgius is rare, she isn't an absolute wall to everyone. And for the last problem of this build, similar to other Beruka builds, we still lack the necessary attacking power to secure KOs. While we can use Ignis to secure KOs on retaliation with Quick Riposte, I prefer the healing to keep Beruka's Axe's guard in effect. There is a slight upgrade to this build. We swap out Beruka's weapon for the Dex Swabber for its lull attack defense effect. Now, to replace the much needed guard, as well as boost our defense and resistance, we use Bracing Stance for Beruka's A slot. While this does again mean we restrict Beruka's use to the enemy phase, this build performs much better since we now have a lull effect in our grasp. Even though we do miss our reduced special charge from Beruka's Axe, and the Dex Swabber and Bracing Stance being expensive options, this would be my go-to build. Now we have one more build, and I only want to briefly mention this one. But we have a speed defensive build. With this, we aim to fix Beruka's speed problem and allow her to avoid doubles. With the boost in speed, we can effectively use guard bearing, with steady posture granting guard status, Dex Swabber for the lull attack defense effect, a defense res oath, and the obligatory IOT shield. We are essentially tough to KO. You can swap out Dex Swabber for the huge fan for more offensive power with its special charge acceleration effect. Alternatively, if Swift Stance 3 comes out, that would be better for a mixed defensive set. The newly attack speed Rain can be used to further lower the speed gap and allow Beruka to take a defense or resistance refine for mixed tanking. Overall, I'm mixed on this build. I like it a lot since it's unorthodox. You don't put Beruka and speed in a sentence without mentioning low. You also have all the pieces for a tank flyer, the speed for guard bearing, a lull skill, and large defensive stats. Even though these skills are rather expensive, this can bring Beruka to a good 40-ish speed. But the issue that I have is that I think these skills would be misused on Beruka. There are other units who could benefit from steady posture that already have a decent amount of speed with decent bulk. While it won't bring their defensive gain to Beruka's level, it can allow them to avoid even more doubles Beruka will have to face. It's hard to even suggest putting steady posture on Beruka rather than a Soleil for instance. Now that we've gone over some builds, let's see how her stats compare to other units as well as my closing thoughts on Beruka. Comparing Beruka's stats to all other units, we can see that her HP and defense are still great despite being a launch unit. In fact, it's almost armor-like. A large majority of other units who have higher HP and defense are all armored. And taking a quick look at her physical and magical bulk, her physical bulk remains quite high with her magical bulk at about average. Although going back to her base stats, her attack and speed are bad. Ranking at the bottom 10% of both stats is disheartening. Having either low attack or low speed is workable, but having both is a death sentence. Her low speed is definitely worrying, since it seems more and more units are getting faster while also hitting harder, making Beruka's job of tanking difficult. Although this is unfair to compare Beruka to all units, so let's take a look at how she compares with all other Axe Fliers. And like the previous graphs, much of her stats fare similar. Her HP and defense excels, resistance is middling, with her attack and speed still being terrible. Although there is one notable stat, her resistance bulk. Surprisingly, she ties for the highest amount of res bulk alongside Camilla and Narcian. Even with the smaller unit pool, an Axe Flyer with great mixed bulk is a rarity. There is one more major comparison, and that's with Mini Minerva. From a glance, we can see that Minerva is less durable than Beruka, having lower HP, defense, and resistance. However, she makes it up by boasting excellent offensive stats. Having a double-digit difference in speed lessens the weight of having lower defenses by her ability to avoid doubles. Adding insult to injury is that Minerva also has higher attack. Looking at their weapons, both the Dragoon Axe and Beruka's Axe share the same acceleration effect, with some form of guard, although Beruka's Axe has a much easier time to keep its guard effect active. What differs is Beruka's Axe inflicts an attack debuff onto the enemy, while the Dragoon Axe grants Minerva a spectrum buff. So during combat, the two axes will have the same defensive ability, but the Dragoon Axe will let Minerva hit harder and be faster. So after taking a look at Beruka's base stats and equipment, after going over a few builds, after seeing how Beruka's stats compare to all units, to Axe Fliers, and to Mini Minerva, is Beruka worth building? While it hurts, I have to say no. Beruka is easier to obtain by being available in the permanent 3 and 4 star pool. She has a built-in guard refine with her unique axe. She has wonderful defensive bulk, rivaling many armors. And of all the available Axe Fliers, she is rare in that she has the highest mixed defensive bulk. But despite being such a great defensive wall, her lacking offense hurts her a lot. With high offense units with some survivability being favored, and Mini Minerva fitting such image, Beruka is a tough sell. But despite everything, I still built her. If there's a unit who I can rely on to take an attack, it'd be Beruka. From encounters with the meta archers such as Legendary Alm, Leaf, and Crom, to various sword wielders, Beruka has been able to lure and survive against most of them. While she isn't exactly best in slot, she's done a good job so far. Here is my Beruka, and I hope you enjoyed this entry of the Heroes Archives on the Quiet Assassin.